This episode of the podcast has been brought to you by Sweet Cheetah Publicity. Sweet Cheetah is an inclusive, socially conscious PR collective that puts their money where their mouth is. They have a current roster of bands that reads like a greatest hits anthology. Brainiac, Catholic School, Jawbox, The New Amsterdams, Oceans in the Sky. I mean, the list goes on and on. They also do PR for record labels such as Ala Carte, Arctic Rodeo, Steadfast, Rad Girlfriend, and so many more. How do they pay it forward? How do they put their money where their mouth is? By generating thousands of dollars in annual charitable donations to the likes of Women in Vinyl, Coalition of Communities of Color, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and many, many more. The man has the receipts. I've seen them. It is real. The artists, labels, and podcasts Sweet Cheetah works with are curated with an eye on working primarily with friends. You could find Sweet Cheetah on all of the social media platforms, be it Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Just look for Sweet Cheetah PR and they will be there. He's been Tim, I've been Peter, and Sweet Cheetah has been beautiful. I would. Hello everyone and welcome to the inaugural 2023 edition of the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. I'm your host Peter, and I am still here. Tonight on the show, we have Dr. Travis Benson, guitarist and vocalist of The True Faith. This is their record release special, Go to Ground, a 9-song triumphant foray into the more Stygian leanings of dark pop music. This is a win for this band. This is a sophomore effort that is rife with everything that makes that band so special and ups the ante in a very particular way that I think can only be done justice by listening to the record. And in keeping with that sentiment, tonight on the show, I am going to offer every song from the album, sometimes beneath the conversation, sometimes we'll take a little break from the conversation and I'll interject one of the songs. It's a mixed bag. It's going to be a lot of fun. I hope you appreciate the effort I put into it. So listen, we've been getting a lot of subscribers for the exclusive content. I was waiting for it to build up to critical mass in 2023 to start offering it, and in the month of January we will begin that said exclusive content with episodes only for those that are subscribers to the show. Thereafter, the exclusive merchandise will come into play. And the compilation album comes out this year, 2023, February 2023. The compilation album that I've been hinting at and talking to you about will finally see the light of day. I hope you're all ready for it. It'll be available on Bandcamp. And for those of you who do subscribe, it will be sent immediately to your inboxes. We're really excited about this whole phase of the operation over here. Tiana and I have been working diligently to bring all of this to you. 2023 is going to be the Book of Very, Very Bad Things year. We're kicking it up a severe notch. I hope you're ready for this. So, tonight Travis and I talk about a good many things. We talk about the band. We talk about his time in medical school. We speak upon our shared vocation in the Plumbers and Pipe Fitters Union. We broach a lot of interesting topics. Some of it may be over your head. Most of it I doubt will be. Either way, This band has been a cause for much excitement in the underground scene, and I think you're going to be satisfied with what we unearth this time around. So without dragging this out any further, I really appreciate all of the support since 2021. I have the best listeners in the podcast sphere. I really do. I appreciate you all so very much. And I hope I live up to all of the expectations and the accolades that I've been given by you all. I think this episode will live up to said hype. Justin's a hell of a good guy. We have a great time. And for those of you who don't know, he is also an integral cog in the Ala Carte Records wheel. So it's not only the True Faith, it's Lesser Care, it's every band that you love on Ala Carte. He has a hand in the label aspect as well as his own musical output. We get into that as well. But that's enough of my yammering. Without further ado, I give to you Justin Benson on the book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast.
All right. Are we in business? Is this working now?
Yeah, it certainly seems to be.
Thank you, man. Sorry about that. I don't know what's going on.
It's
cursed.
It's computers. That's the problem.
Well, literally, as I was logging on, like my webcam just like stopped working initially, and I was like, it's been an ongoing problem. So I figured, okay, I'll do the phone, but that's an issue too, apparently.
Yeah, I use my my phone as my webcam because they're just it's a mess, and I'm like a caveman. I'm a Luddite. So
yeah. I'm with you on that. I'm getting too old for this shit, so.
Yeah, I'm 46. I'm way too old for this shit, Riggs.
All right, at least you got a decade on me. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's just falling apart on me. But just for the sake of legality, can you state your name and give me your permission to use your likeness and your voice for the purposes of this podcast?
Yeah, so my name is Travis Benson. I give my consent for you to use my voice and likeness for the purpose of this podcast.
Wonderful, thank you. So, Travis, just to kind of give everybody a background on you, what is it you do for the True Faith? Because you're the True Faith now, not just True Faith. You're the True Faith.
It was actually, yeah. So we started off as just True Faith, and it actually just started off as just a solo project initially. The name change came from Francisco, who is like the label head for Ala Carte Records. He just we were trying to figure out like what to do for a test press cover for our last album, and he like drew this really crude, like awful drawing. And on it, he for some reason wrote "The True Faith," and I was like, "That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard," but I love it. So we slowly like migrated everything over to that name. Also due in part to the fact that we keep getting tagged on Instagram for this Filipino band from the 90s that I thought was dormant. I guess they're back, but we keep getting tagged as them. So hopefully to eliminate a little bit of the confusion, putting "the" in front of it might help. But in terms of what I do in the band, so vocals, play guitar, in prior iterations, like on the first demo and the first EP, synth. So kind of the gamut on that.
So like, with the exception of the band, you're also a physician, correct?
Yeah, I mean, everybody in the band is at this point. It was really weird. So we ended up meeting all at medical school, which is really weird because I wouldn't expect people to have like an interest in this type of music who, going in the medical field. I think like most of the time when I think of like a lot of the people I went to school with, or a lot of people who enter that field, much more normal in their tastes than goth and post-punk and shoegaze and all that. So it was a pleasant surprise, like actually meeting these people and then finding out that they also have an interest in making music, and then just kind of like seeing it come together.
Yeah, the only extreme I could think of where people were involved in the medical field would be like the band General Surgery, the grindcore band. And, like Carcass, they used a lot of medical terminology in their lyrics. Now, with you guys lyrically, it's not really about that. You're really like, you're not even playing into the tropes of what would normally be construed as post-punk or goth, as the dirty word that goth is now. It's more like just true to life, hard on sleeve type of lyrical approach. I'm guessing you're in charge of that part as well.
Yeah, so I did the lyrics, but so actually, I kind of want to go back to something you said before about like this band, General Surgery or whatever. There's actually been like a decent amount of punk people who have been in medicine, which I've always found kind of fascinating. I want to say it was the drummer of Down to Nothing is a doctor.
Yeah.
And then like the drummer of The Offspring is like a gynecologist. And so you end up like actually meeting people in the medical field who have like this like deep-seated interest in punk, which is also, it's always reassuring because it's such like an uptight, stuffy, conservative field.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to see that kind of change, just because, I think it's better for patient care if, doctors have like a perspective that somebody who grew up listening to punk might have, I think. So that's always good. But then back to like lyrics, we actually do like a lot of like subtle tongue-in-cheek like medical references in a lot of the stuff we do. So like for example, the 7-inch we did has a song called Leucovorin Rescue on it, and that's a reference to it's medical terminology for somebody who is on like certain anti-cancer medications that deplete like folate levels, for example, and eventually their their bone marrow will become suppressed. You give them a medication called leucovorin to help rescue the bone marrow, and it's just known colloquially as leucovorin rescue. And I use that kind of like a metaphor for like that idea, but within like everyday life type things, like injecting something to kind of reinvigorate and like find purpose in life again. So there are like little things like the first EP, actually, wow, yeah, I guess it's three things now. The EP, As Much Nothing as Possible, the first album, They Can Always Hear You More, and the now upcoming sophomore album, Go to Ground, are all actual references from a book called House of God, which is this like really kind of like crude like book from the 70s about like what it's like living as a doctor, like more specifically as a medical trainee, and like the system that just like eats its young and like hazes everybody, and like how that like really feeds into a lot of the negative things that happen in medicine. So we ended up using parts of the book as references in the title. And so like just for some background, like as much nothing as possible in its entirety is the rule that the best delivery of medical care is to do as much nothing as possible, which I wholeheartedly believe. Like we do too much sometimes, you know what I mean? The other one, They Can Always Hear You More, is in reference to medical training. And then Go to Ground, it's a reference to old people. They always fall in the hospital. And so these are all like kind of tied into that book. Hopefully the author doesn't send us a cease and desist now, but now that that's out there. But so there are these subtle references, but like really overt things like that, like make it very clear, like we're in that field. I don't like, I want to like, I like having some subtleties about it, but it's not the entire identity of the band.
Well, no, especially, and when I said there aren't like overt references, like we're not talking about like Carcass lyrics, like or album title Descanting the Insalubrious, like like things that like legitimately came from. I believe he was reading from like mortuary science books and the like when he was writing the lyrics, and that was all alliterations toward veganism with Carcass, but more so bands like General Surgery where they're using like legitimate like terminology just as the driver for the lyricism. That's not the case with you guys. It's a lot more, like I'd said, more human, more emotional. I'd found, and I find it very interesting that people that are 10 years younger than me and younger are as interested in a musical style that was very prevalent when I was 10 years old. 9 years old when I was
Mhm.
first really like consuming music, when MTV was first a thing. The Cure, The Clash, all the way to Susie and the Banshees, and you know, Sisters of Mercy. Even these styles are infiltrating a younger, more vibrant community. Where do you think that found its impetus?
It is actually really interesting because I feel like uh, we went through like the post-punk revival of like the early 2000s, and that was really like the first big wave of something like that. I mean, there's always like the very 90s like ethereal wave goth that like it could be a little corny, but it is still like a departure from like that early post-punk sound of like bands like the Chameleons or, you know, the Cure or whatever.
Yeah,
And then like, you know, bands like Interpol came around and like kind of created this revival, that then kind of like faded away again, and now we're kind of coming back up now. I want to say like probably 2013 to like 2018, there was that big surge of bands that came back and you know gained a lot of popularity. But I want to say like social media in a way has also kind of fueled this, and so you know I am not like really up to date with like stuff like TikTok, and like I try to be because I feel like so much music discovery for like younger people really happens in that arena.
yeah,
And so like I'm trying my hand at it, and like I see like 14-year-olds like making all this like ranking their top favorite goth bands of like The Cure and Depeche Mode, and it's just I mean it's awesome because like when I was 15, like I like punk and hardcore. Like
yeah. Me too.
I probably would have thought like The Cure was lame when I was 18. It wasn't until like I was 18, that like I really kind of found an interest in like dark music in general. And I listened to like a lot of power electronics and industrial and stuff like that back
Yeah,
then. And so it's been more of like a progression in that sense. But now like really young kids are finding like this genre and like really kind of reinventing it in a weird way that like I don't know, like I think hyperpop, even though I know that's like a Spotify created term, like is actually like the perfect amalgamation of like 2000s era children who have been raised on the internet
yeah,
in injecting that influence into like punk music. So like I'm not a huge fan of like 100 gex by any means, but like it takes like element, like I think it's probably one of the most punk things that's out there right now, in the sense that like it's, you know, done in a DIY fashion. Anybody with a computer can do it. You don't need to have money to even like get involved in that type of music. And it's unique and refreshing in the sense that like they're taking like their experience of like, you know, being like on AIM chat and like MySpace and like all this stuff, and like and how that actually influences the type of music. And post punk is now I feel like starting to go that same way. When I come across like artists who are actively using TikTok, it's very much that like it's like the hyper pop, what hyper pop is to like pop music, like the new like wave of like post punk on TikTok is to like goth music in general. So it's
yeah.
kind of cool to see the evolution, but don't really know where it came from to be perfectly
Well,
honest. But
I,
I'm here
I
for
I
it.
can say in all honesty, like in my generation, going to hardcore shows in the late '80s, like you look behind me, I have a Gorilla Biscuits figure right over there. I have the Cure right over here. I named my daughter after a song on that record, as a matter of fact. Like these things kind of like coexisted in the '80s and early '90s. Guys my age and older than me, you know, we were into as much into The Cure and My Bloody Valentine as we were into Gorilla Biscuits and Judge and Black Flag and Youth of Today. It all made sense just because it wasn't for everybody else. It was like behind this wall of alternative, very, very like light euphemism on alternative. But you know, they're like it always felt left of center, so it always worked together. Now, I thought it was interesting when you said you started out on hardcore, so you probably would have thought The Cure was corny. Where was the disconnect for you there? Were you just like, it's just about like being tough and, or,
I mean, I think to some degree, like, I mean, my musical tastes have definitely gone through like different iterations throughout time. And so I remember like the very first show I went to, I was 12, and it was Motorhead, Dropkick Murphys, and Hatebreed all on tour.
no shit, I'm wearing a
And it was
Hatebreed shirt right now.
I'm wearing I think a good friend of mine down in San Diego has a like a leather company called LTL Co. Put that plug out there for him. His name's Wayne. He played in Jesus, what band was he in? Grave Digger, is that the name of it? No, I don't know. He was in some band with like dudes from like Comeback Kid that was pretty big back in 2000s. Anyway, I don't know. Yeah, no. So like my interest was kind of in that, and like I remember, so a good friend of mine in middle school, his dad owned a record store, and so like that was like where I got my information from in terms of punk, and so like that's really kind of like I spent so much time in that record store growing up. Like I even worked in that record store as a teenager just for store credit to buy records, and so I was really into like first thing I got exposed to was like UK 82 style punk. And then from that, I got into like hardcore. I remember like seeing Hatebreed. I was like, wow, this is super cool. Like this is really gnarly. And then for ages 14 onward, like started getting into just some weirder shit. I remember like The Locust was like a big interest of mine back then. I remember seeing them on tour with like Lightning Bolt and Arab on Radar. It was like
I
must have been
toured
like
with them
2002. Oh,
extensively.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
yeah.
amazing. Yeah, I
My
want
old
to
band,
like,
yeah.
what was your old band?
We were called the Distylysis Compendium. We were like, if you could imagine if Yes was really fucking heavy, we were like that.
That's a great picture to imagine. Yeah, and from like there, like I mean, 16 on, like I got really into like post-punk no wave stuff. I was in a no wave type band when I was 16 with a great friend of mine, and put out some records with that band, and like that was my first real foray into like being an artist, so to speak. And so yeah, when I was 14, like The Cure probably wouldn't have like sat well with me, like in terms of just like it wasn't what I was into at that moment, and like my exposure was still pretty limited at that point in time. Like, but come around 18 is when I like really kind of got into that, which I mean it feels so long ago now, but
And to be fair, that
yeah.
wasn't a part of your childhood. Like you weren't growing up with The Cure on the radio per se.
No, and a lot of
Whereas I
like the
did.
music. Yeah, exactly. And a lot of the music that I was exposed to, like in early childhood, came from like records my dad had, and like so my dad like played guitar and was a big influence on like music was just always around. Like we always listened to music, and so like, but like it was stuff like Dire Straits, which is awesome.
Mark
I love Dire
Knopfler's a
Straits.
genius. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it, but it was very different. Like or like Meatloaf, Bat Out of Hell was like never left my turntable when I was 8 years old. You know, like and
Jim,
so like that was
Jim Steinman, another genius. I
yeah
mean,
yeah.
we wouldn't have Sisters of Mercy Floodland without him.
Yeah. So it was a little bit different exposure in terms of like I didn't really have access to like what was on the radio. Like I lived in the middle of nowhere growing up, and like what I did get was Canadian radio,
Yeah.
which in the 90s was probably like the most amazing thing ever, because Canada had like their own weird wave of alternative rock that never really made its way into the States, but it's like super good. So yeah.
But it seems to me though, like people your age and younger are really getting it right too, where we tried in the early 2000s. Like Interpol was very good. Don't get me wrong. There were a few glaring examples of people who were kind of like taking the post-punk thing and making it modern again. But it seems to me that like, you know, you guys, Lesser Care, Soft Kill, like you're doing it your own way. Everyone's doing it in their own fashion. And it's phenomenal to see. But I think what you guys do in particular that is very interesting is you're embracing the pop elements of it, and you're not shying away from it, and you're making it really listenable and really beautiful without making it like cheesy.
I appreciate that. I think like it's so hard because I'll be perfectly honest. When I sit down to write a song, like I've tried hard to just like emulate exactly what I hear. Like I'll try to like basically rewrite a Chameleon song or something, and it never like comes out that way. Probably for the best, but like I mean the influence is there. But like at the end of the day, like I try to make a song that has a hook that's catchy, because that's what I want to hear. Like honestly, I kind of just write music for me. Like if nobody listened to it, like I mean that'd be a bummer, but like I'll still listen to it. I don't give a shit. I'm one of the people, I'll listen to my band. Like there's no shame in that. If people are embarrassed by like listening to your own band, like why are you even making the music to begin with? Like if you don't like it, then like what's the deal? So ultimately, first and foremost, I write music that I like, and so in that comes with that kind of pop element. Like I'd love to be able just to like write a really dark, like morose sounding like thing, like early Soft Kill was like fantastic, like, and I would love to be able to write something like at the first album. But like I can't. It ends up like anytime I do it, like it ends up getting a little bit more on that poppy side. And at first I was like I didn't really embrace it. With this new album, like I'm like, fuck it, we're doing it. Like write a pop song. Like at the end of the day, like write a song that's catchy that you like, and the majority of the songs on there I don't really see as goth. Not even really like post punk in the true sense. Like they're just kind of more like pop songs, I guess. Like I don't know.
The only influence I could say directly, like I can kind of hear that is Depeche Mode, and that's just with the newer singles, and that's a compliment coming from me. Like
Well, I appreciate that.
Depeche Mode is one of my all-time favorite bands. Like Violator changed my entire view on pop music, but I see that, and only because it's poppy, and we are all children of the Beach Boys and the Beatles, whether we realize it or not. So it's almost inescapable if you have an ear for music that you're going to write something that's listenable and, creates an uplift, even if it does have a dark hue. And that's legitimately what's happening here to me. It's really well written pop music with a very dark hue. Now on this upcoming record, are we still, even though you said admittedly it's in a pop milieu, is it still dark lyrically?
Yeah, lyrically and musically. I think there's like one track in particular, which is the song that closes the album. That might be one of my favorite songs I've ever written. That is just probably one of the darker things that we've done in terms of just like the sound and lyrically. Lyrically though, like the majority of the album, trying to like go through some of this, like are really just about like, honestly, life sucks sometimes, and like accepting that is part of just the condition of living. Especially like, I don't know, just like from a medicine perspective, we've always like wanted to like make everything perfect in terms of curing disease, curing depression, all this stuff. But some of these things are just kind of necessary aspects of living that we also need to just learn to live with and accept. And so a lot of the songs, like A Cry for Help in particular, Minimal Change, are really just about like shit sucks.
Yeah.
and that's not necessarily always a bad thing. A lot of it's about feeling stuck in a place, which I think a lot of people can relate to. And, especially a lot of this was written towards the tail end of medical school for us. And so a lot of these feelings of like this big transition of life coming to where like we've now had to like, we've been in school for the longest period of time, almost forever. And now we're entering a workforce, and like that comes with a lot of stress, a lot of changes. And so like, not necessarily the most darkest lyrically in terms of like the album itself, but it has its moments. The last song on the album is called The Picture on the Wall, and that's the one that I think stands out in terms of like, if you like dark shit, that's probably the song for you. The first song on the album is probably the poppiest thing we've ever done, and it's also my favorite on the album. So maybe a little something for everybody in that regard.
Now, you're all coming from like a medical bent. You're seeing some of the darkest shit. Like I come from a different world. My degree's in English, but I come from a seedier end of life. And I would still think that you see darker shit than I've ever seen, because you're in a hospital environment. You're seeing people at their fucking worst, at their most dire, their most dismal. How does that not come through musically? You know what I mean?
I think it's just trying to compartmentalize personal life from musical life. And there's obviously like a certain degree that needs to cross over. But I think like kind of what we were alluding to earlier, like we don't want to be defined as like, that's our gimmick,
Mm-hmm.
which is hard, because it is such a major aspect of our life. But I think the reason why we even started the band in the first place is to escape from that side of life and having that. And so like for it to be like a larger influence than it currently is would almost like defeat that entire purpose. And so, but it's true. Like, working, like, I think the last time when I was trying to set up this call with you, like I was in the ICU at the time, and like death is all around you. To the lack of like not for lack of trying, like you're obviously there, you're trying to save people, but it's just like something that happens, and being able to digest that and then even like compartmentalize it. Like, it's very hard to be like a truly empathic individual in the medical field because it just eats you alive. And so, you know, we all go into the field because we care and we want to help people and everything like that. But it takes a certain degree of like emotional IQ and emotional maturity to be able to separate your own personal individual feelings from, you know, everything that's around you, because it will drag you down.
Professional distance is a big deal in that sort of environment, I'd imagine. I worked in a nursing home for a few years, and that's because I minored in sociology, and that it destroyed me within 2.5 years. I could have never made it as a doctor because I was just fucking wrecked the whole time. But I'm not even talking about like from a gimmick standpoint, from a lyrical standpoint, more from like a psychic standpoint. This is more for you to slough that off than to, you know, shoot it through a prism then.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely influenced because a lot of the things that I sing about, like, are things that, you know, we're all feeling in a moment. And I think that is a condition of our employment and our training and everything like that. But I prefer to keep it that way in a way that's much more generalizable to people than to do a very niche, like singing specifically about things that, you know, we witness in patient care. And I also think to some degree too that there's like a professional boundary that needs to take place too. Like in the medical field, like you are in a different position where like not only are you dealing with very like personal things with patient care, but on top of that, like there's a lot of legal stuff that's around that too. And I think you know, I try to respect patient care as much as possible and not like really try to factor that in, because I wouldn't want somebody to like take care of my, you know, dying mom, for example, and then find out they wrote a song about it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, so trying to have like some sort of boundary too, I think is helpful in that regard.
How do you actually, the collective of you all, find time? Because that's a very time intensive position. I mean, I have personal friends who are physicians, who are oncologists, who like, it eats so much of their time. Like it's tough. It's tough to even find time to like take a day off.
Yeah,
You know what I
no,
mean?
it's impossible. I think when the band started, so first of all, like it was initially just me, as I mentioned. It was kind of like just like a COVID project, just because I was sitting at home. And I think the time before that I had been in a band had been at least 10 years. I did vocals for like an agnostic front style hardcore band, which I loved, but like very different vibe. And so like I was like, oh, you know, like a lot of people, I should start playing music again. And I was so out of the loop at that point in time. But a lot of like the stuff that we had, and like instrument wise, was actually locked up in our practice. Like we had a practice space because like me and Quentin, who ended up playing guitar for us, we were just messing around jamming and stuff like that, but we weren't doing anything serious. And then COVID happened, and so then we couldn't access it. And so I had some synthesizer stuff here, and like that's kind of like what really drove that first demo, because it's drastically different. It might as well not even be the same project, but I didn't want to like change the name, so so here we are. But I totally lost my train of thought. Remind me what we were just talking about.
No, we were just talking about finding that time.
Finding time. Yes. Thank you so much. So during that period of time, like when we were in training and COVID first happened, we were pulled from the hospitals for a couple months. And so it actually provided so much extra time for Quentin and I to really kind of get together. And that's when we wrote all of the first EP, As Much Nothing as Possible. Once that took place and like we were going back in the hospital, finishing our rotations and stuff, it was still able to find some time here and there to do some things. I think as we scaled the band up to include more people, and you know, we put more records on, you know, under our belts, and we started to play shows because you could play shows again, like the time commitment increased drastically. And so luckily, last year medical school is notoriously like much more chill period because you've already done a lot of your main requirements. You get a lot of time off because you have to apply for residency and do all this stuff. And so that was like the perfect time. Like we ended up doing our first album and then writing and recording the second album, like all within this period of time that we had, because we knew that after, you know, the start of this year that we're currently in, like we would not have a lot of time. Somehow we managed to fit a tour, I mean, a short tour, but a tour nonetheless, with Doused into that period of time as well. And so now we're at the point where like we want to go do like a West Coast tour. We had some time picked out, but like because we're actually in the workforce now, we have to put in our schedules like literally a year in advance, and so it's just not in the cards for like this year. So June is when we'll be able to like reconvene and figure out what the plan is going forward. And the hard thing is too is like a lot of us are going to be redistributed. So in June I have to move to Philadelphia. Yeah, and then Quentin, our guitar player, will likely also have to be down in Pennsylvania, while Dylan, our bass player, is staying in Boston. So
that's my hood, Pennsylvania. That's where I'm at.
Oh, yeah. So Quentin hails from Schuylkill County, right
by me.
He's out that way. Oh, okay, good. Yeah, so yeah, he's out that way. I'd be moving down to Philly in June, and so we'll be able to do like a lot of stuff still. Shows are going to probably happen a little less frequently, but we were doing like a show a month, and like that's just not sustainable. Like I'm too old for that. Like I would love it, but like, man, my bedtime is early. I have a baby now, like, so all these things like really kind of impacted, but we try to like find time for it as much as we possibly can. Which,
so you're a family man too on top of all this.
Yeah, I have like a kid who's almost 7 months now, and so trying to tour on top of that is also like a very difficult thing. So yeah, I don't know what I got myself into, honestly.
Well, I mean, I'm 40, like I said, I'm 46. I have a 3-year-old and a 21-year-old. So
wow, that's the gap.
That's the gap, 18 years. But you're better off doing it now, man.
Oh yeah, and it's like it's the coolest thing in the world, honestly. Like I would not want to give that up for anything. So, you know, if for whatever reason that's what it came down to is the, you know, family or the band, like it's an obvious choice. But luckily, like
you could still be a band. You just don't tour. You just don't, you know.
And that's such a hard thing, you know, because I think that like we're still at a point where like touring is like this necessary thing that really has to take place to be able just to get like any kind of recognition in music, and it's really unfortunate because like touring is just like a waste of money. Like it's just truly a waste of money. We got so lucky. We somehow like at least broke even, maybe even made like a little bit when we did our tour with Douse, just because like we booked all the shows ourselves. Like we, you know, really streamlined our backline. So we were able to like just drive cars and not have to rent a van and do all this stuff. And we had like hotel points saved up or stuff like that. And but if you're like trying to do a full scale like US tour or like tour like half of the year, like it's just impossible at this point in time, even like for small artists. So I don't like it. I wish like we were at a point where like it wasn't necessary, but that's still kind of the way it is. And and it's fun. It's fun, but like it's fun, but it's not fun at the same time.
It's not fun being away from your family. And you toured with Douse from Portland or Doused?
Doused from Philly on Flesh and Bone.
Yeah. Okay. Just wanted to make sure I have a relationship with Douse from Portland. That's why I asked. But
no, you know, I mean, I'm originally from Portland, so I moved to Boston from Portland, Oregon. Grew up there, but I don't know Douse from Portland on a personal level.
Listen, there's something about people from Portland making dark music that it's prevalent in this time period right now. If you haven't noticed, there's probably about like a dozen really good bands from the Portland area that are making dark music that's dark, melodic, and fantastic. I don't know what's going on up there. Maybe that's
Portland, man. Well, Portland's interesting because like when I grew up in Portland, so I lived there for like the vast majority of my life. I only moved out to Boston. God, I must have been like 32, so not even like maybe 5 years ago. So the music scene in Portland has always really been more of like this weird indie pop focus. Like that's been like the bread and butter of Portland music, like when I was a teenager and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I remember going to shows and it'd be like Quasi and Slater-Kinney and a lot of like really cool like slowcore bands, like kind of like Spitting was from Portland and like all that stuff. And that was like the bulk of it. And then out of nowhere, like they had their own like weird like kind of death rock post-punk renaissance that happened with like bands like Arctic Flowers. It was really kind of sad because like it was like 2011. I was in a death rock band. I played drums in it in Portland, and we like missed the wave. Like it was just didn't happen. And then like bands like Bellicose Mind and like all that kind of came out and like kind of put. I feel like that was the shift of like dark music in Portland really kind of taking hold. And there was always like, you know, Portland always had like a fantastic crust scene. Like I think all like the Memphis transplants, like Tragedy and From Ashes Rise and Remains of the Day and all those bands. So like I feel like that dark vibe had always been present, but now like within like the goth realm, I think there's been a bigger presence, which is great. And Portland is dark, it's dreary. You know, growing up in Portland, like it always was kind of a shithole. Like that's just kind of like the nature of Portland.
Yeah.
And you'll hear people complain all the time about Portland. They'll be like, "Oh, Portland got so bad. It used to be so nice." Portland was never nice. Portland was always a dump,
Yeah.
right? But then in the 2000s, people from California came, priced everybody out, made it nice, gentrified it a bunch, and now they all left, and now it's just returning back to its natural state. And people don't realize that. So like, there's always been like a lot of like sadness and like despair associated with that city. So it makes total sense.
Yeah, the dream of the 90s is not still alive in Portland. I hate to tell people, no matter what Portlandia tells you. It is funny that it kind of got that push in the early 2000s, though, where like, you know, the Portlandia came out and people were like, we're moving to Portland. And it got really cool really fast. And like you were saying, I remember the Portland of Tragedy and the whole crust thing. That's kind of how I had seen Portland because I was big into that shit. And I remember going there and I remember it being real shitty. I remember seeing a lot of prostitutes, a lot of meth heads, a lot of just gnarly shit. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's just like I lived in Manhattan in the early 90s. You ran from gunfire in the early 90s in Manhattan. Now you go there to buy a latte. You know what I mean? It's a whole different vibe. But
Portland's always been a really interesting microcosm in terms of stuff like that. Like it's always been a very like sex work prominent city, just in the sense of like one of my favorite factoids about Portland is it has the highest number of strip clubs per capita than any other city in the country. And it's by virtue of just like the laws that are there that allow you know, certain things to take place that don't always happen other places. So it's a big industry there, and it's so much more widely accepted. Like it's just such a very normalized thing, whereas here in Boston, like there's none. It's like none, like which I think is also another historical thing. But like so Portland has always had like a very kind of seedy past in that, especially when you go out east towards like 82nd Avenue, where like a lot of that kind of takes place. A lot of the you know, a lot of sex work, you know, survival sex work, stuff like that, and a lot of drug use takes place. But it always been present in like downtown area too. I used to live in Chinatown, and like that was the norm. You just go out and like people were using actively on the streets, and like you just mind your own business, don't do anything. Like, and then it kind of, you know, and Portland's got its own issues. We don't need to necessarily go too into the weeds about that, but like the city has done such a poor job of like managing everything, and the housing crisis in Portland is just, it's really unfortunate. And so there's a lot of people who are in like really unfortunate position in Portland, I think primarily due to a lot of the gentrification that took place, pricing people out of these areas that were normally lower income residential neighborhoods that then turned into like the hot spots of like, yeah, like the coffee shops and all that stuff. And
yeah,
I'm just glad I'm out of there.
Yeah, and you're just going to another city that's been a party to the same shit, because Philly is not much better, but it's better. It's a little better. I'm not gonna lie, depending upon where you're moving in Philadelphia, but you know,
I still gotta figure that part out.
Yeah, you cross that bridge when you get to it, but it stands. With that being said, it stands to reason why there was such a renaissance of dark music there. But when it comes to someone like yourself, coming from a place like that, you didn't fall victim to it. Quite the opposite. Did you kind of like more aspire to make it out unscathed, so to speak?
You know, it's so in Portland, everybody has like their own story with like drug use, drug addiction, whether it's like affecting them personally or people they know. And it's, I mean, that's just how prevalent it is. Like I know Soft Kill sings a lot about it, but like everybody knows like a huge handful of people who have overdosed, committed suicide, anything like that. And so like, I was in a position to see a lot of my friends kind of go down paths like that. And like, so like one of my good friends, Jerry, he was originally from Cincinnati and he moved out to Portland. And we met when I was like 14 and started bands. And we were like in numerous bands. Like you just like that one person that you always just start a random band with and put out like a tape or something.
Yeah.
And we, best friend growing up, we had like the same music taste. Like the dude was just a genius. Like he just somebody who like would have amounted to like supreme greatness, but like just never had his life together enough to like really do it. And so I remember too, like this dude was like a vegan straight edge guy, right? And then like all of a sudden, that the old story of like hurt my back because I'm a personal care assistant for somebody in a wheelchair. I started taking the oxycodone, couldn't get any more of that. Started like he ended up like getting into opium, which I'm just like, what kind of old timey is that, like smoking opium?
Yeah.
But then that led into him using heroin, and he was always like, and we were still like in bands, still doing stuff, and we even like lived together a lot of this period of time, which was a nightmare. And I remember he was always just like, oh, it's fine, I'm just smoking it as long as I don't shoot up. Like there's always a line that he would like establish, and eventually it'd always get crossed. Like there's always something else that like would push it past that, like out of necessity, into where he was actively using. And so like he ended up moving out of Portland because like you're just surrounded by it. Like I think like when I had a punk house, like when I was like in my 20s, like I was somehow the person responsible for it, which worst experience in my life.
Yeah.
Like
Punk houses suck.
Yeah, literally everybody was using. It was just insane. Like you wouldn't know. Like that's how it ended up happening. So like, and so he ended up moving out of Portland because you just can't like get away from stuff like that. And he ended up overdosing in Cincinnati and dying. And so it's like, I mean, maybe Portland's not necessarily to blame 100%, but like, and it's just so ingrained in like the punk culture there that like it's so hard to escape. And so like, I guess when you do see a lot of it, like, and it's in your face all the time, like, avoiding it, if you're lucky enough to, like, it gives you that motivation to like just like not end up like your friends.
Yeah It's the same with Scranton, Pennsylvania, where I'm from. We were and still are a hotbed of heroin and opioid addiction, abuse, and prostitution, and that whole vibe. And I went the other way. I just made it out because somebody somewhere likes me. I don't know who it is, but that entity certainly does. But there's that double-edged sword, because it's the shittiness, but also the music. They somehow go hand in hand.
Yeah, they are entwined.
and it's incredible that you got to not only move on to medical school to become a medical doctor and are creating amazing music. Is it a similar story with the rest of the guys, or it's just a mixed bag?
I think like, so me and Quentin like had kind of similar upbringings, because like I've never been to Pottsville where he's from, but he paints a picture of it not being like, not being the greatest area. And same thing with me, like even before Portland, I lived up in like Northwest Washington state, where like same thing, rural blighted communities of like industry that used to prosper there, that all like went overseas, and now like nobody has a job anymore, and like just hit hard by like the drug epidemic. And so we have this experience, and like nobody in our families are like in medicine or even adjacent. And so like being like first generation people, like trying to navigate the process was like a very unique and interesting thing. And like my background is like blue collar. Like I was actually a union pipe fitter before I ever even went to school.
I'm a union pipe fitter.
Get the fuck out, UA.
I'm a union pipe fitter. Yes, sir.
I was in UA local 290 out of Portland.
524.
Amazing. Wow, what a random occurrence. Yeah, so I did that. I did the full apprenticeship, all 5 years.
Yep.
I was a journeyman, foreman, even general foreman for an additional 5 years. So I did it like for a total of 10 years. And I did that just because my old man like did it, and that's just like what you do.
Me too. Son of a pipe fitter.
Yeah, and so like that's just kind of like how it ended up working out. And then I knew like this wasn't, exactly what I wanted to do. It just didn't like have like the same kind of like mental stimulation I felt like I needed. And a lot of it was getting kind of like, especially when you get to the position of like being a foreman or a general foreman, and you're not working
Yeah.
with the tools just because you can't. Like it just didn't have the same appeal to me. I missed like being out in the field welding or like,
Yeah.
detailing and stuff like that. So like it was a change for me, but like it's not like a common story you hear of somebody who's like used to be a pipe fitter and is now in medicine. And so like very different than like a lot of the other people that like I met throughout medical school and everything like that. And then Dylan who plays bass, like he I think his dad's like a physicist or something. So he's had like an academic background in that sense, but has always been still like kind of on the fringe in terms of like his personal taste and stuff. And so it is kind of interesting to see like how people get led to that path while
Yeah.
still having like an interest in the subcultures that they do, because there's just not a lot of crossover, honestly.
See, I went to NYU, and I was, going to be a professor. I ended up having a child, but I got my degree in English lit and did my 4 years of school, went right into the apprenticeship at 21 years old, because I was like, what am I going to do with my life?
Yeah.
This isn't going to amount to
Well,
shit.
and what's crazy too is like it's such a good deal. Like people don't realize like how good you actually have it. Like
Oh
I
yeah.
honestly probably would have made more money in the long run if I stayed a pipe fitter.
Yeah.
When you think about the lost wages and the amount of money that I've had to invest in like education and stuff like that. But like I don't know what it was for your local, but for us it was a 5-year apprenticeship and
Yeah,
fully
5 years.
paid. Yeah,
Yep.
fully paid. I think when I started, which was 2005 maybe, the apprentice wage was $15 an hour, which was crazy back then. We're like, wow,
Mhm.
$15 an hour, and in every 6 months you get like a $3 raise. And so like by the time I became a journeyman, I was making like $36 an hour, which there's a lot of things that pay better than that now. I think like the journeyman wage in Portland now is significantly higher than that, like maybe in the 50s. But like
Yeah, and you get
it
about
was.
like $27 an hour in hourly benefits too on
Oh yeah,
top
the
of that.
benefits were amazing, and then like the overtime, and so like you can easily clear $100,000 a year, like
Mhm.
as a journeyman pipe fitter or plumber, or actually really any of the major trades, electrician or whatever like that. And like people still look down on it, like because it wasn't like this traditional path of going to college. And it's just not taught like that that's a viable path for like kids in high school anymore. Like
Yeah.
it's so crazy. So like I would much rather like my son go into doing something like that than going into being a doctor personally. Like,
But you'll
just
never
'cause-
get laid off, dude.
well, we'll see about that. But the thing is, like, getting laid off in construction, it's nice too. Like, I mean, as long as you've like planned for it, like getting unemployment and you're not on the hook for looking for a job. Like, I miss those, I miss those days.
Well,
Actually,
the only
like,
thing I miss is like, well, I only miss welding. That's because running work, it's completely different. But like, you bend a rod and you bang it in, and like you could just hear it hit, like, and you got that weld right because you hear it suck in. Like
yeah.
there's a satisfaction to that that's unlike, people don't understand. Like to me, that's like being a doctor almost, because you got that right. Like you're not going to get any bleed out with that. Done.
Uh,
There is a satisfaction, a hands-on satisfaction. So I could see kind of the reciprocity between being a physician and being a fitter in that regard. You know
Well,
what I mean?
the carryover between the two like is just insane. So like actually it's funny because I've written essays about this for different things, and like uh, just even like the whole entire premise of like medical education is based on an apprenticeship system. So it's identical to the apprenticeship system I went through as a pipe fitter. Like you're at the bottom of this hierarchy.
Yeah.
A majority of your training is done on the job. So like medical school, you do rotations, but like when you're an apprentice, like you're working 40+ hours a week still. We had to go
And
to
going to
class two
school.
nights a week. Yeah,
Yeah.
and go to class 2 nights a week. You learn directly from the journeyman that you're working with, so it's all very much like the same exact thing. It's a trade at the end of the day. But even then beyond that, like the diagnostic stuff, so like halfway through my apprenticeship, as a piper, I actually made a switch over to do HVAC and controls for a while, which I thought was fun. I ended up going back to doing I did orbital welding because we had a lot of semiconductor plants, and I'm sure this is the most riveting conversation for your listeners right now. But
well, for me, I mean, I do orbital welding. I understand.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay. So so I did orbital welding at places like Intel and stuff, and it's chill. It's great. You press the button. I mean, there's some effort that goes in that. You got to know the right settings, everything like that. But when I did HVAC and controls, a lot of it is diagnostics, trying to figure out how to approach the a component of the HVAC system that doesn't work anymore, or even just the biomechanics of the human body greatly mimic a pump and a compressor for that, and it's all the same stuff at the end of the day. It's almost identical. So it helped me probably way more than I think I could ever appreciate, and I think it put me in a position too, because honestly, the vast majority of people that end up going to medical school, and good for them. I wish I had their tenacity to do this at an earlier age, but for a lot of them, being a doctor is their first job. That's just kind of how it works out, right? So having work experience, especially in a field like the trade, which is rough for a lot of people, and it's so drastically different, it's just a different perspective. And at least now when I get somebody who's they were in the shipyards for 40 years, coming in as a patient, I have that
you have a frame
degree
of
I know what their experience is to some degree, and can't take that into context for their medical care and stuff like that. So it's interesting, but I ended up going back, and so after undergrad I had a summer where I knew I had to get some money to move to Boston. So I went back and worked in the trade for an additional 3 months just to make some money. And
you kept your card up.
Yeah.
Good man.
I let it lapse now, but it was up still back then. And so I went back and worked a job, and it was affirming that I was okay. I'm happy in the direction I'm heading in life. But it was fun for those 3 months, getting back in there, working, breathing in all this silica dust that I'm sure is going to give you cancer later in life. And,
I'm going to die of mesothelioma. That's going to be my water for sure.
We used to just rip asbestos off, no big deal.
Yes. Spray it with a little bit of red slime, and then see you later. Yeah. But that was I still do it, man. I still do shit on the side like that. I'll do a rip out in somebody's basement and put in either a new steam system or a new hydronic. Asbestos everywhere. I'm chewing it.
Take care of yourself. It's important to live a long life.
Yeah, well, I'm already 3/4 of the way there, probably. But I guess what we could get out of the pipe fitter gig, because I could go on about that shit all night. That's been my life. The 80s.
We'll save that for another off-camera conversation.
Yes. I love it though. I love that you were a fitter. That makes me so happy. But
it's very random.
Yeah, that's so fucking weird. But you know what? That's how. That's just how normal that really is. Coming from blue collar, that type of lifestyle. I think that kind of cements us in the punk thing too, because that's kind of the root, right?
Yeah.
There's no elitism truly, other than the fact that I'm punk, so I'm cooler than everyone who's not punk. But within the confines of the punk scene, blue collar, that's pinnacle. I work for a living, boys on the docks, oi, 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 that kind of thing. The whole skinhead aesthetic, that's pinnacle. That's what we kind of had striven toward at one point or another. I don't know what made me think I'm going to go and go after this degree, this English degree. I should have just gone into the trades off the hop, but I thought I needed it to be a writer. Really?
That's the lie they all tell us, man. They say go to college, do all this stuff. Mm-hmm. There's other viable options, and I think there's definitely something about being in the trade where don't get me wrong, man, capitalism bad, your employer, your job shouldn't be your life, all this stuff, but there is a certain degree of pride in work that comes with that, and you see something that you built from nothing and the degree of craftsmanship that goes into that. It's just like, that's not something you really find in any other facet of life, I feel like. It's a very unique thing to that. And so, you know, it's cool. Like, and I definitely get why, like, all the boy bands sing about, like, you know, working the job and like all that stuff. So
I think it's the same thing with creating music, though. Like, as a fellow musician as well, you're you're breathing life into nothing. Okay, so like you're taking just an idea, like an inkling, pulling it from the ether and giving it legs, like verse, chorus, verse, whatever. You're making something from nothing, which is almost, in my opinion, a stronger, there's more of a God complex almost in it, that you're taking complete nothingness and giving life to dust,
I think with music too, it's like, cause you're the one who's creating it. Like, when you're given a set of blueprints, like the engineer had already been there, it's been approved, like, but here you are making something for yourself, like out of nothing. It is I think a little bit more fulfilling in that sense.
Yeah.
And not even just like the creation of the music, but the actual like distribution and marketing of it is something like I never really had a great appreciation for until got to this point. When I was younger, I had like a tape label that put out like noise records and stuff like that. Like when I was like in high school and stuff. Yeah. It's like, and it was so fun, but it was like a very different beast. And so like having like a period of 10 years, like where I stepped away from music and like was, working in the trade essentially, like to come back and see just how much the landscape has changed and like, how do I actually like get people to hear the stuff that I've just made is like so bizarre. It's so unreal. Cause like last time I was in a band, like streaming didn't exist, which is like, so crazy to think about now. Cause it's so ingrained in music, but
that was what was cool about noise too, especially because like what we had were like examples of like cassette labels like Triple R and people like that who were just doing like short run cassettes, and you'd have people like Thurston Moore from fucking Sonic Youth on these labels doing noise. It was very democratized, which was very fucking punk rock. And going back to what we were talking about before with what these kids are doing on TikTok now, I think is a shadow of that. I think it all kind of comes out in the wash as the same kind of thing, even though we may not 100% see eye to eye with the aesthetic.
Oh, totally. The ethos is all the same, I feel like. And it's I think like we have this issue too, even within like post-punk goth, like darkwave music, where like there's always this this like superiority complex that comes with like, oh, I have like a Juno 60 from like, the 80s, and it's like full analog synth, and like I have my Euro rack set up. I got like all this stuff like original, and like, oh, you're just using like a software like VST to make all your synth sounds. Like there's so much like elitism that I feel like takes place in this, and like it's like the antithesis of punk. Like the most punk thing would be like download a free app to make music on and like do it. Like you don't need to put any money into it. Like, and we've kind of like strayed from that. And so like getting back to these like TikTok kids, like they're not buying the like the Jupiter synths. Like they're using like Logic or even like maybe GarageBand, like just make something with like a cracked plugin they found on Reddit. It doesn't get more punk than that, honestly. They might not look punk, but like no, but punk's not about how you look, man. It's about like the ethos behind it. So
yeah, like just because you like we know how to like run plugs on Moogs and stuff like that, that does not make us any cooler than anyone else. It just means we had a lot more time on our hands and it was a different era. Truly. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I'm not Brian Eno. I don't know how to do it like he did either. But was it cool? Sure. Because I'm a Luddite, and I think someone like completely like boots on the ground creating something from nothing is amazing. But I'm a punk at heart, and seeing some kid just finding tools that are easily and readily available and expressing himself, that's cooler. There's something cooler about that on a visceral level, on an immediate level. Like that's poetry. That's That's John Lydon. That's Joe Strummer. You know what I mean?
Totally. I'm with you on that. I feel like, I don't know. It seems like there's also been somewhat of a shift though, like back, not to sound like the old guy, but like back in my day, like people just, you'd start a band and you just play show. Like there wasn't like this impetus on like getting a certain amount of streams or like, hitting these milestones or these benchmarks. Like you did it for the love of the game and you played shows and like nobody showed up, and that's fine because you still got to play and like your friends might be there. Like, so I feel like that aspect of it is kind of shifted, because like now there's all this external reward with like, it feels good to like get your Spotify for Artists Wrapped at the end of the year and see like how many people listen to your song. Like it validates you in a way that wasn't possible before. But I think that kind of just more speaks to like just like how dystopic like social media and like the internet has really like made how we view our self-worth and everything like that. So
I kind of feel bad too, because like when that all happened with this podcast, like my numbers were at such a rate where I was posting it like, look how good I did at my fucking, I'm pushing 50 bitches and I did this. and at first I was like kind of feeling myself, and then I took a step back and I was like, this is just stupid. What the fuck am I doing? It's not even why I do this. It's not even why I do the podcast, but
I have to remind myself like it's all bullshit. Like at the end of the day, like because here's like how, because okay, after getting involved like with doing this band, and then like Ala Carte Records put out our first EP, like I've been getting more and more involved on the label side of things, like as a partner in the label up until more recently, and taking care of like a lot of logistics that surround that, and like really kind of seeing how the sausage is made. And like everything's a scam. Like it's all about the appearance of like having a bunch of people interested. So we all send out these press releases to all these blogs that literally nobody reads, like just so we can repost the image of like, the blog's Instagram saying that they wrote about us, when in reality, 9 times out of 10, the blog is just reposting the press release that we wrote for ourselves anyway. And so it's all this illusion that we're trying to like convince other people that like, hey, people care about us. And like, it's the same thing with our Spotify numbers. And like, and it's kind of sad too, because like I see like, I won't name names, but like this came up in conversation. There was a band who I saw in the post-punk Darkwave like realm, who had like, no joke, like 25,000 Instagram followers. I was like, wow, that is wild. Like that is absolutely crazy. And then I go and look at their Spotify and they have 400 monthly listeners. And I'm like, there's a huge disconnect here. And it kind of sucks that it comes to like that you would pay for Instagram followers to create the illusion that people care about your band, rather than just like letting things happen organically and like actually creating an audience and like a connection with your audience. And I think that is what's missing a lot in music now, because this external validation that social media and like that whole presence has really kind of created.
That's why I went for the fanzine kind of like idea with this, because I don't buy ad space. I just kind of let it happen. Letting it happen made things happen for this, strangely, but I think it has more to do. I think it has more to do with how cool the bands I listen to are, and all that is it's not a testament to anything I do at the show. It's a testament to my taste in music. You know what I'm saying?
That's always good.
So it's basically like people like you made this happen for me, so I kind of have to like tip my hat, because I wouldn't even be here without you. But there's such good music to be listened to and to be beholden by. You know what I mean? Like I really think that now, and I'm not one of these people who go back and it was fucking cooler in the late 80s when Youth Crew was happening. Bullshit. I think music is better now than it has been in my entire life.
Well, and that was part of the reason why I'd gone so long without even like really playing music. We were in like this weird slump, I feel like, where nothing was really resonating with me on a musical level. And there were bands that came around like maybe 2015 and onward, like Softkill being one of them, where it's like they were doing something that like had this like really like obvious influence, but still in a way that made it unique and different, to where I felt like I wasn't just listening to like a clone of another band. And I think that there was a period of time too where like, man, 2008 like to 2012, like it just, the things that were like kind of more dominant in the scene just didn't like really resonate as much with me. There's a lot of like the Jay Reatard stuff, like type terminal boredom type punk that like was cool, but like it was kind of like a one trick pony type thing, and
Yeah.
that got a lot of interest. And then like and so I kind of checked out for a while, like, and now coming back into it, with like kind of like a clean palette, like there's so many bands that like are doing incredible things. Like it's like an embarrassment of riches because there's really just like too many good bands,
Yeah.
and it kind of sucks because like you want to be able to like one support all the bands like and celebrate all the bands, but then two is like it just kind of hard then if you want to like start a band to like really get attention because there's already so many really good bands that are already out there
Yeah.
that you kind of just need to like do something unique and different, which I can't say like we are by any stretch of the imagination, but like shoegaze, for example, and there's so many shoegaze bands right now. They're like
Yeah.
99% of them are from Philly for some reason. I don't know what the deal is, but this isn't an issue because they're all great. Like
Yeah.
I can't really think of like a band that I heard like recently, a shoegaze band, and I'm just like, wow, this is ass. Like this is just not good. Like it's all
Yeah.
really good. Sometimes shoegaze can be a little formulaic or like the same, but like there's always bands that are pushing the envelope and like doing new different things, like Full Body 2, or they're getting a body of water, or like stuff like that where they're introducing other aspects of different genres to it. But like if I were to like start a shoegaze band today, like man, nobody would probably listen to it because there's just like, why would you? There's just so many like really good established bands out there right now. So
I mean, I think that's another genre though where we kind of have to examine how it infiltrated every aspect of the underground when it happened too, because without shoegaze, you don't get quicksand. Without quicksand, you really don't get the post-hardcore movement of the early 90s. So like a lot of these things, even though they saw a rise and then a drop off, but they never went away because the reverberations were always felt. Same with what you guys do. Like there are so many examples of bands that come from different pedigrees, but used the same ingredients and introduced them and allowed this thing to kind of resonate and continue. This stuff never goes away. It just gets popular or it stays underground. I think what's kind of beautiful right now is there's an audience for stuff that would have already existed. It's not like I think you guys are doing something because this other band was doing something because that band was already doing it, because everybody sounds different, as I'd said, but there's an ear for it now. And I think that ear is larger. And I think that ear is more attuned to nuance. And that's why I say, like, this is truly my daughter's generation right now, she being in her early 20s. And this is the generation that doesn't give a shit about genre per se, doesn't give a shit about appearances. It's just about, is this cool?
Yeah.
And it's fucking cool now. And that's what's great. And it exists in a time period where major labels don't matter anymore. MTV doesn't even show videos anymore. So it's not about that. Now it's just about quality and the ability to recreate quality.
Well, and what's interesting too is, yeah, and you mentioned pedigree. Like, I think what's really funny too is like when you take any band you currently like in any kind of adjacent genre of like post-punk shoegaze or whatever, especially if it's like older people who are in the band. Like, I don't know, I've used Softkill as like an example multiple times. So let's just use Softkill as an example. Like,
yeah,
you go back far enough, like there's like the common denominator between a lot of these bands, ours included, are like people who were into hardcore when they were younger. And hardcore is so kind of funny because like it really couldn't be any further off than like a lot of like the shoegaze in the traditional sense, like Creation Records era stuff, or like jangle pop, like House Martins or Smiths or anything like that, or even like neo folk, man. Like Death in June was like really cool in the hardcore, hardcore realm for a while. Like I blame Integrity for that, but like like there's hardcore has a way of like kind of spawning. Like it's a unifying thing for a lot of people who then like find other niche musics that aren't necessarily like directly related. Like, I mean, shoegaze now, you can obviously hear like a lot of hardcore influence. and especially even like in the quicksand era where like that was a little bit more like evident. Because now like rather than trying to sound like Ride, I think a lot of shoegaze bands now try to have like more of a quicksand type influence anyway. But like, it is like the common thread that kind of ties it all together. And hardcore introduced me to a lot of stuff like that. Like when I was 14, and like everybody was like, you know, all about the Smiths and hardcore, and like that was a big turning point for me too. Where like that started to introduce me into that kind of thing. So I blame hardcore for everything, but like it is, I think, like that common thread that ties a lot of it together.
Well, what's kind of great about like the hardcore thing is, like when I was a kid, it was very foreign, but as you know, the late 90s graduated into the 2000s, it was entry level weirdo music. It was everywhere. You know what I mean? Like Death Wish Inc. was tied to Epitaph Records at that point because Converge had signed to Epitaph. So like, and the whole Screamo, which it wasn't fucking Screamo. Screamo happened 20 years before it, but what people considered Screamo was happening. Yeah. So like it was entry level cool guy stuff. You know what I mean? And it wasn't that far removed. You could turn on MTV and get an example of a hardcore adjacent band and go down the rabbit hole really quickly. Whereas 20 years before, when I was a kid, you had to know the weirdo skaters with the mohawks who liked the punk stuff, who would get you into the hardcore stuff. And you know, Youth Crew was just happening as I got into it. But what makes hardcore amazing and ubiquitous is it was surfaced enough via like when Sick of It All started to get popular, and then Quicksand, and then Orange 9mm and the like. It was like a great little sweet spot for people who were into metal but were more sensitive, so they kind of gravitated more towards the weird stuff. And you know, even Nirvana we could blame for it to a degree, because it gave people who were into like more aggressive music a mindful place to exist. So it's a great jump off point. So I'll never shit on hardcore, and I'll never discount it, because it is the reason I am who I am to a large degree. And it's the reason why music that's cool is still cool right now, because it gave a place for people like you to jump off into things that are different and cooler, but it's still that through line. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it'll never die.
Well, and it's interesting too, because you know, like I said, like I feel like jangle pop and hardcore couldn't be like really much further than they already are, but like it gave like kind of like a safe space for like music exploration, which I would not have traditionally figured hardcore would, right? Because we would talk about like the whole tough guy mentality, but like it made it okay to like stuff that like you might have gotten beat up for before. And so like
Sheer Terror used to cover the Smiths, man. I mean,
yeah, exactly. So like and I think that you brought up a couple of interesting things. So like one, you mentioned before how like kids today are like bucking the whole idea of like genre and everything like that.
Yeah.
And I think it's part and due to like the fact that music discovery is so different now than what it used to be. So you just mentioned like what you had to do to find out about new bands. Like when I was in, like, you got 10 years on me, but like when I was young, when I was like in my teenage years, if I wanted to find out about a band, I either went to the record store and just picked out a record because it looked like it'd be cool, or I knew it was on a label that released something else I like.
Revelation for Roadrunner, you turn it over.
Yeah, okay. I got the Revelation Records compilation, like Rev 50, which by the way, like there's so much stuff on there that, man, Whirlpool is still like one of my favorite bands of like the 90s, and nobody talks about it. It's absolutely crazy. There needs to be like a resurgence of bands that does like 90s like alt rev stuff. Like that would be fantastic.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, I digress. But like it was so hard.
A band called Lacing.
Oh yeah. Okay, I can see that. Yeah,
they kind of do that.
I could see that. Yeah. So like music discovery was just tougher. Like you had to like get a copy of Maximum Rock and Roll and read the reviews, or like. Yep. Or look at the insert of the record you just bought and see what bands they thanked, so you can then like go and find those.
Big one. That's a big one. Yeah.
And nobody does. I should have done that for this album. Like nobody does that anymore, which is kind of unfortunate. But like,
who's reading liner notes in this day and age?
Exactly right. So like, music discovery is just so different, and I mean, it's just easier now, which is fantastic. And it also was kind of interesting too, because hardcore, I think there's so many different avenues in which people got into it. So like I got into hardcore through punk, but like that wasn't always like the norm. And so like what I think we're experiencing right now is like there's like this whole like new metal resurgence. And like I was already listening to a lot of hardcore by the time like new metal was really kind of like taking shape. And so like I think at that point in time in the hardcore scene, it was like looked down upon like this sucks. Like this isn't real. Is this not hardcore?
Yeah.
They're playing some like chugga chugga riffs, but it's like people would never admit to liking Corn, for example. Like it just
Yeah, but
wasn't.
you know, the first time I saw Corn, they were opening for Sick of It All in Orange 9mm.
Yeah. So like, and that, but that's also kind of what's weird about this is like it was such a huge gateway for people into hardcore with stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the age in which people were doing that, I think we're at the point now where like they're, you know, we've been kind of at this point for the last several years, like with like Code Orange and stuff like that. But like that influence, I think, is starting to show more in hardcore, like the new metal
Oh yeah,
influence.
yeah.
And so that's also interesting because like it wouldn't have been something I necessarily would have predicted. You know, and so like I can only think about like, you know, 15, 20 years down the road where like the kids who got into hardcore from the new Turnstile album, what that influence is going to look like in terms of like the hardcore music they make down the road.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of fascinating to think about. I don't know.
I think I'm here for all of it. And being a guy who's, you know, I remember my jazz musician father who turned me on to everything from the Stones and T-Rex to like Sun Ra. His disconnect from modern music happened in his 20s. He got out of Vietnam, became a pipe fitter, and he shut down right around when Jim Morrison fucking died pretty much. And you know, like he still had an ear for cool stuff. I remember when the Chili Peppers came out in the 80s, I turned my dad onto the Chili Peppers and he was like, this sounds like Funkadelic, but like with the Clash. I said, yeah, that's fucking it, Dad. That's it. So he's like, okay, you like good shit. But, you know, mostly he was disconnected from new stuff that was happening unless I brought it to him. I'm in a very rarefied state right now where I am well past the age my dad was when I was bringing him shit. And I'm still very open to like letting new things occur and enjoying new music. I think that speaks more to the music that's happening than to my personality. I think the music's just that good that's still happening.
It makes it easy when the music that you're listening to allows you to enjoy it. I don't know. I mean, yeah, because I don't know. Like I said before, when I went through like my slump of just like nothing new was really sounding cool. Like it's not like that anymore. Like I feel like now I'm at a point where even compared to when I was younger, I'm more actively seeking out new music than I probably was even like in my teenage years.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is due to like just how fantastic the bands are, and then coupled with the fact of like how easy it is now, like how democratized it is for like any band can put anything up on Bandcamp. Like I've discovered so many like amazing like demos from Bandcamp that I never would have heard otherwise, and I feel like the bands never went off
How
to
I
do
found
anything
you.
else. Amazing. So
You.
it works. It works. So it's different because like back then, like if you wanted to find a band that only had a demo out, like it was at a show. Like you had to catch them at a show and like buy the demo. Like there was no press about like a lot of those bands. So like it is really cool to see now.
And furthermore, just to be like, think about when we were younger listening to music. A majority of the bands that we were listening to were only 2 or 3 years older than us. We weren't listening to guys who were 10 years older than us, 20 years older than us. Now it's okay. Right now, my band is not doing much of anything. Well, we still play, but like we're not out there like you guys are. There's no 18-year-old kid who's going to look at you guys and be like, bah, pff, they're too old. They're too old to be playing music. They don't give a shit. It's not the same thing anymore. There's just not premium on the identification of like aged people. We're bridging gaps in a very different way now. When I was 18 years old, if I saw a guy 28 years old and he wasn't in Sick of It All or Agnostic Front, fuck you, right? Like, dude,
Yeah.
you're not getting in the pit with me, so I don't give a shit about you. It's not like that anymore. That's just not even a passing thought. You know what I mean?
Oh, totally. You know, I would have felt the same way when I was like 14 and there was
Yeah,
somebody my age in a band. I'd be like, damn, get off the stage, old man. Like, what are you doing?
exactly,
Like,
exactly.
but yeah, now it's like not even a thought. Like, and there's definitely bands that like, not even like bands that were around back in the 80s, but like newer bands that still have people like pushing 50, maybe even like pushing 60 that
Yeah,
like are incredible and like nobody bats an eye about it, which is fantastic because like it shouldn't be that way. I think,
yeah.
you know, it doesn't matter what age, like you get into music, like you want to start a band, like honestly, everybody should just start a band. Like record a demo, write a song. I don't give a shit. Like just do something creative in that sense. Like it might suck. It will probably suck. Like if I like had a nickel for every horrible thing I'd ever like written, recorded in my lifetime of like making music, I'd be a millionaire at this point.
Me
Like
too. Me too. Oh my
so many
god.
bad, so many stupid bad bands that I was in. Like it doesn't even. Yeah, I don't even
Every
want to talk
death
about it. So.
death metal or grindcore adjacent thing I ever did, with the exception of one or two, were fucking awful. But like I was searching. I was getting in the mix, doing what I needed to do to find my voice, and that's the important
Yeah,
part.
it's just fun.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's kind of weird too, like, and I guess like this is also just kind of like the generation that's coming up in music. Like, I got to catch myself because I sometimes find myself having a bad attitude about it. But like, not to be like one of those people like, oh, you got to pay your dues. But like when you were younger and you were in a punk band or a punk adjacent band, whatever, like there was like ways things happened, like booking shows, like now it's like so democratized, like anybody can like start a band, do all this stuff, which is fantastic, and I love that. But like they didn't have that same experience of like growing
The
up in a
the
punk
vet
band.
the vetting process.
Exactly. And it's hard because like some bands, like I've had this experience where like bands that are they're good, they're great bands, but on a personal or like a business side of things, just don't get the DIY or punk mindset in it.
Yeah.
And it's fine because like if you're good and like you want to do this as a job, like fine, good luck. Like I hope you succeed, but like it comes at the cost of like actually being a good person to like play a show with, or it kind of creates this weird rock star mentality that hasn't been earned yet.
Yeah.
And it's tough because like literally anybody can go and like go on YouTube now and watch some random guy tell you how to book shows or like how to like make a press kit or like how to manage a band. And usually when it's somebody who's on the internet like that, they're doing it because they're trying to sell you on something. It's not like
They
not like
didn't
they're
read
actually
book your
good
own.
at it.
They didn't read book your own fucking life.
Exactly. Like they don't have the personal experience. They probably just
Yeah.
saw another video and they're making a video of it. But a lot of kids will kind of take this as dogma of what the music industry is like and kind of come at it from that perspective rather than like we're having a good time type of perspective.
Well,
And
I have a great
it kind of sucks.
I have a great story for this, not to monopolize the time, but about 7-8 years ago, my current band, we were approached by Joe from the Queers to put them on because they were on tour and they wanted to come through. And I know the Queers come with their own baggage right now, but Joe is a nice guy, even though he has some questionable belief systems.
I don't know about the queers drama, but
Well, he's kind of right wing adjacent now.
Oh, okay.
But he was always kind of abrasive, but he's a nice guy. And he reached out to us and he said, look, here's our guarantee. We said, we're not going to get you that, dude. But if you still want to play a show, we'll put you on. We'll set it up. We'll give you the lion's share of the door to get you close to your guarantee. And he said, dude, just get us whatever. And, we played the show. He ended up almost making his guarantee and he still gave us a quarter of the fucking show because we put it on. That's fucking punk rock. And
Yeah.
the Queers have been a band since the 80s. Okay. They played with the Ramones. They did the whole thing. This dude's still doing it, still reaching out to these nobody bands and giving us a quarter of the fucking door because we set the show up. We put him on and we went the extra mile for him. What, tell me what's not cool about that. That's incredibly cool. That's incredibly punk.
Yeah, no, and that's the way it should be. And I feel like, bands that, like let's say the Cruise, for example, would often like take smaller bands on tour and like kind of like nurture, that relationship and everything like that. But now, like, again, like I won't like name specifics, but like bands that are in this scene are like straight up like asking for $500 guarantees in cities they've never played before. And the reality is, like, your Spotify streams don't always translate to, bodies in the venue. And, and it just kind of sets this really bad precedent, like, to where, like, certain bands, like, I know promoters won't work with anymore because of this attitude, that, like, they deserve this. And, like, yes, in a perfect world, I would love everybody to be able to get $500 each time they play a show. Like, that'd be fantastic. But, like, if you're not at that point yet where the guarantee is because you have something to offer the venue or the promoter, in the sense that you know that you will fill the venue, blah 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 blah. Like, and it's just so kind of backwards to me that like bands today are like straight up like sending out riders for like venues with like less than 100 person capacity. Like, they don't even have a green room. Like, why are you sending? Like, I don't know. It's just so bizarre. It's not.
They missed
like
the
that's not
Fugazi. They missed the Fugazi model, where it's like, we want a percentage of the door. We don't want this amount of money. Just whatever you get at the door, give us this percentage, and don't charge more than this at the door, and we'll play your show. That's fucking cool, is what that is. People lost the idea of just being cool people, and having that be the guiding principle of being in a punk adjacent, hardcore, whatever the fuck band you're in, independent band. Fugazi should be your North Star. Yeah. And they're just not.
And I think the real reason is, like, the kids just weren't raised in that world. Like, the internet gives you every piece of information you could ever want in your fingertips, whether it's correct or not. And so I guess, like, if you're a young band listening right now, like, just play the show, ask for a percentage of the door. Like, 9 times out of 10, like, when we play a show, like, like, I think there's been times where, like, we just didn't get anything from the door. Like, it just worked out that way. Or we're not the touring band, and if the show only brought in $40, I'm not taking a cut.
No, you give it to the touring band.
That's another thing that I think a lot of people don't understand at this point. Like, oh, well, I played, so therefore I should be compensated for my time.
No.
It's like, like, sure, in theory, but like, it's not being a good partner in this whole thing. And then nobody's going to want to work with you. Nobody's going to want to play shows with you. And really, like, if you're playing the show, like, you might sell some merch. Like, I mean, more often than not, like, our merch sales exceed what we make from the door, and that's kind of why we play the shows, because I got records I got to move. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly. So, you got, and I think that's the takeaway from this whole riff is just, if you're in a young band, number one, you're supporting the touring band because someday you're going to be the touring band, and you want that band to take care of your ass when you get to their
karma.
Town. Karma's a bitch, especially when you're in a touring band. But also, whatever model you're using, it's the wrong one. Just think about or look up what Fugazi would have done and model yourself after that. But I think to kind of like wrap things up a little bit, I always ask the same question to every artist every time. And if you're probably not familiar with what this show's about, but it's the same question every time. And that is, what is it that inspires existential dread in you?
I think about this a lot. Like, it's this sounds horrible, but like, existential dread, I think the biggest source is just like the uncertainty of longevity of life, and not in like the short sense. It's like, how long do I have to live? and not in a way of like I dislike living. It's like working in medicine, like, and I see people who pushing 100 or even more sometimes, and like the degree of autonomy and agency that they sacrifice for the sake of living or because their family wants them to. I often think about like what my life is going to look like when I'm at that age, and what does that mean for me, and like it actually kind of gives me like more of appreciation for like doing the things I want to do now while I'm still like able to.
Yeah.
But like, you know, like I don't want to live too long, I guess is the moral of the story. And
Well,
and that's
entropy versus expectation, kind of like.
Well, that's the thing. Like we expect that like our current state is sustainable for an extended period of time, and it's not. Like we are, like you said, we're in entropy. We're slowly, slowly breaking down, and you reach a point of no return where like that is like you, the moment, like how you feel in this moment is probably going to be the best you're going to feel ever again in your entire life, like from a
Yeah.
physical standpoint. And like that's also a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. Is like it's a necessary part of living that we're slowly degrading. But I guess like if I had like one big takeaway for people is like write an advance directive for yourself, make your wishes known.
Yeah.
Yeah, create a living will, designate a
I've had
healthcare
one since I
proxy.
was 22. I've had one
Good,
since
you
I was
got to.
22.
You never know. You
Have
never
to.
know what will happen. Yeah, so that's my existential dread, is just like the uncertainty of longevity of life.
That's actually one of the more realistic answers I've ever gotten to that question. And I guess to kind of like wrap it up, if you were to leave everyone with one kind of like nugget, as someone who I find to be intellectually fascinating, what would you leave everyone with tonight?
That's a good question. I think kind of touching back on what we were talking about just more recently is my nugget of information is like, we don't we've all come from like different backgrounds within the music world, but there's like the punk ethos we were talking about, I think, is consistent for a lot of, like, even across like the different genres of everything. And I hate that that's kind of being lost now. um you know, the nugget of information I would get is like, for bands who are just starting out, like, identify with other bands that you like, reach out, like find like mentorship in some facet like that, and like ask to get on shows, like hustle in that regard. Don't like come at it with like this expectation that you're owed anything, because like, might be an unpopular opinion, because like I'm in a position, luckily, where like I do have, job prospects outside of music, but like I don't view music as like my like source of income. This is a hobby for me. This is what I do for fun. This is what I do to like separate myself from the realities of living. And I know not everybody approaches that way, and it would be fantastic if we could all find a way to like sustain ourselves from our art, and we find ways to do it. I do like graphic design for like side work and stuff like that, but like, if you come at it from a place of like, this is you attempting to make money, like you're gonna alienate yourself and your band from other people. You're not gonna be able to like really achieve what you want to achieve. And so I would just say, like, come at it from a place of learning and like respect for other artists. I'll have to tell you the full story, like off the record sometime, because you'll blow your mind, what some people do. And so like, just pay your dues, I guess. It's kind of, I feel like such an asshole saying that, but like, pay your dues.
No, I think that's kind of universal, and I agree wholeheartedly. But listen, we're gonna have to get together again, because we have a ridiculous amount of shit in common. It's actually scary.
We'll probably just have a whole nother couple hour conversation about just the trade. So
legitimately, between the trades and punk rock for sure. But listen, man, this has been a blast. It's been great meeting someone that I'm that on the level with, so I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to the record. Hopefully, when the next thing comes along, you'll come on again, but hopefully you'll come on before then. So
yeah, we'll have to see what's in the future. I mean, I'm down to come on whenever, but the record's out. I'll put in the plug, January 10th. I don't know when this episode's coming out, but the record's out January 10th. So I hope people...
This will come out probably that day.
Amazing. Yeah, I hope people give it a listen, just because like it's something that I enjoyed, being a part of, and making it with my friends. And at the end of the day, like, that's all I want out of music.
Yeah.
It's having fun with your friends. That's what it's all about.
Listen, bro, this was great. And I'll hit you up soon. This will come out the same day as the record, hopefully, if not right before, just to plug it.
Cool.
And
awesome.
I'll be in touch.
Sounds good, man. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It was awesome. Take care of yourself.
Take it easy, Peter. See ya.
See ya, bro.
And there it is, folks. My interview with Travis of The True Faith. We touched upon the fact that they had to slightly shift their name around due to a Filipino band. I'm not familiar with said band. I am familiar with the debacle precursor to this episode. So it's a good thing that they did make that little switch, because it helps delineate them from anyone else. And furthermore, this band has a distinct identity that I think comes through pretty glaringly upon listening. As I'd said at the preamble of the episode, this band has created a lot of excitement within the underground, and it's well deserved. I am immediately transported by this music to a different era, a different time, a different space, somewhere that I personally enjoy being. I hope you glean the same feeling from this music. It means the world to me, it really does. And Travis is just a great guy. I loved talking to him. I can't wait to do it again. It was a real honor getting to have him on here for his band's release special on the Book of Very, Very Bad Things. We get to do such cool stuff on this show. It's astounding to me that we're afforded all of these opportunities. And legitimately, I can't rest on those laurels. Those opportunities are afforded to me by these great bands that have enough trust in what we do to give them a good avenue to showcase their wares, their music. And I really have to thank them for that. As far as the podcast goes, you can still go and become a member if you want to part with some money, or if you just want to do a one-time donation. All of this is available on our Instagram, all of this information. Anything you want to contribute, you can do through Instagram. But the most important thing you can contribute is your ears. If you love what we're doing, just like us wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe there. Share our posts on Instagram and Facebook and just, let people know that you think what we're doing is worth listening to. That is the best thing you can do to be a supporter of this podcast. If you don't want to part with any money, I totally get it. Times are really, really tough right now. If you want to support us with your enthusiasm, with your ears, and with your hearts. With that being said, it's been a real pleasure and honor. I've been away for 2 weeks. It's felt like forever. I miss talking to you all. I hope you missed hearing me. He's been Travis. I've been Peter. They've been the true faith. You've been beautiful. And this has been the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. From Tiana, our son Kanan, and myself, I thank you all. I send you love and blessings. And I will see you on Friday the 13th for our super spooky Friday the 13th special. Have a great night, everyone. Take care.